Call this meeting of the PZA committee to order, and roll call, please.
Mr. Olthoff.
Present.
Mr. Stauffenberg. Ms. Hertzberger. Mr. Hess.
Present.
Mr. James.
Present.
Ms. McBride. Mr. Marcotte.
Present.
Mr. Scholl.
Present.
Mr. Tripp.
Present.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Whitney.
Present.
Mr. Cruz. Mr. McLaren.
I have a request to make a change in the agenda. All right, we'll have public comment first. Mr. Hall.
I didn't see why you wanted to change.
Yeah, I thought he wasn't going to let me speak, Stanley. I didn't know where we were headed with that change of agenda. I just want to make sure that everybody on PCA is aware that on Tuesday, May 27th, the meeting of the Regional Planning Commission will have an educational presentation done by Phil Dick. He's the director of the McLean County Land Use and Planning Department. He's going to talk about wind energy and how they've done their plan, their zoning ordinance, their siting opportunities. As we get ever closer to people wanting to do wind energy in Kankakee County, the Regional Planning Commission is at least hopefully driving this forward. Hopefully some of you can make it that night. I think it will be sooner than later that you will start to see proposals come in to change the zoning ordinance that will at least provide an opportunity for the county board to evaluate options about putting wind energy on property in Kankakee County. So that's 7 o'clock here, 4th floor, Tuesday, May 27th. Hope you all can make it. Thanks.
We get paid for it?
As much as I get paid, Stanley.
No kidding?
Get them out.
27.75.
You've received a copy of the minutes for the April 25th meeting. Any additional correction? If not, a motion to approve the order. Motion by Mr. James, seconded by Mr. Whit. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now, I'll entertain a motion to change the order in the agenda, moving number 6, planning, up to exchanging between transportation and planning. Just reversing the order.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Witt, second by Mr. Tripp. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Under planning, discussion of May 6th action meeting, NCO meeting recommendation.
Many of you on the committee here were in attendance for our meeting on our proposal to develop a micro loan program for Kankakee County, and I would like to just kind of put that out there for discussion, also to get some feedback on whether there's any interest in us going forward with Axion to put a proposal together. So I just wanted to open that up for discussion at this time.
Any discussion? Mr.
Brief us
McLaren.
on what you want.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was at that meeting, and I think it's pretty positive. I mean, to look into. I mean, I think there could be some benefits for some area businesses and that kind of thing. Obviously, we don't know all the details at this point, but I mean, personally, I think it's a good idea to move forward and check into it.
Any other questions? Mr. Scholl. Oh, I'm sorry,
Sure.
Sherry, I didn't, you're 11.
Yes, thank you. Didn't they say that this is not for a startup business, or it is, you can't get a loan? It's not for a startup?
It is,
It is for startup business. Okay, and it's for expansion?
yes. And it's for typically businesses that cannot get conventional loan, that cannot get a conventional loan.
But they have to exhaust all the other avenues before they go to Axion?
Not really. They can go to them first, and Axion would tell them where, if they have to, if they have good enough credit in a well-established, business, they would have to go to private lending to get their funds. But no, they don't have to necessarily prove that they've exhausted all their options.
Okay, thank you.
They don't compete with banks.
No.
The banks are helping to support this as an opportunity for lending, which they might not approve. Mr. Marcotte.
My experience is the bank actually loans the money and the SBA guarantees it. If the business goes forward, then the SBA has to pay back the bank. but the bank does loan the money because I did have an SBA loan.
This is different than this type of. Mr. Washington? Oh, I'm sorry.
Bob.
Mr. Shaw. Go ahead, Joe.
No.
I will refer to the elder statesman.
I'll be here all day.
That's our entertainment for the
Are you making a motion, Mr. Washington?
No, I was just going to speak to the matter as well. It appears to me that it's what has been needed for a long time. We've had this loan system, but the loan system is handicapped for helping smaller businesses for loans under 25,000, and these loans are specifically under 25,000. They're keyed to be for under $25,000, actually 15,000, I believe. So that if you've got a small business or a beauty shop or a sandwich shop or something that you want to get started, and you can justify that enough, then you come to this organization and they will set up the loan for you. Our monies can't be loaned to anyone within the city, but we can put supporting monies to this organization so that they can loan monies to people that are within the city.
Mr. Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the informational meeting that was held, I thought was very informative. It gave us a lot of ideas, and it is a positive development in the direction of motivating, stimulating small business. My question, though, is in the revolving loan fund, what percentage of that would be used in this program? Is there a percentage? Would all of it be applicable to this program, or?
No, Bob, I think that the way that I envision this is that the county would put a percentage, a small percentage of its funds into the program and evaluate it on an annual basis, see where it's going. I'm thinking anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, and to get the program up and running, and it being evaluated, we would evaluate it as we go along. But no, I wouldn't say that we would have all our funds. I think it's just a small portion of those funds earmarked for that. I think the rest of them have to be for larger projects.
Any others? Mr. James?
Thank you. I'm a little concerned. I was at the presentation also, and according to the book, they originally had some loans put in there by banks that forgave them, and they're just now getting back on their feet. And I'm just wondering, what type of a program are we going to be able to get involved in where we won't be threatened the same way? I'm not interested in, doing the same thing they did. I mean, they lost hundreds of thousands of dollars that was picked up by a bank. I don't think we can afford to do that, in my opinion. So I'd be concerned as to what type of safeguards we got up front right off the bat.
Well, and I think that's what I'm asking for, the feedback. What do I need to go back to them and make sure that I covered the concerns that you have? And if that's one of them, I'll make sure that that's covered. It might not be to your liking, Stan, or to your, but I'm just saying, that's what I'm trying to get from you guys as a result of that meeting. What are your concerns? What do you like? What do we do if we, and are you in a position that you want us to go and start a conversation or a dialogue with them to come back with you for some kind of proposal? So.
How many here were at that meeting that's familiar with what we're talking about? So if there is, I've got some information here for you to look at if you want to see it on what they were.
Mike, do you have the newsletter?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I forgot it upstairs. I can run up and get it.
That's all right.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things we have to realize is that these are loans that are going to be higher risk featured, but the initial loans themselves is a small sum. It's not a large sum that we're loaning. Is that correct? in this endeavor. I would move that, I would make the motion that we continue discussions with this, to develop this program for Kankakee County, with the realization that it is a higher risk. If it was not a higher risk, it would go through the private sector and the banking business. So we're helping those, once they're on their feet, they would go into the banks.
The interest rates reflect that higher risk. The interest rates are higher than clearly
Second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Washington. Any further discussion? Mr. McLaren?
Thank you, Chairman. I certainly agree with Mr. James as far as the safeguards. I think about the average loan they were talking about was about $8,000.
Yeah. Yes.
And it was also my understanding it's not necessarily limited to startup or expansion. I mean, even equipment purchases and that kind of stuff. I know they had some criteria what the money could not be used for, salaries and such, but I mean, I think the scope goes a little bit bigger than just expansion and startup businesses too.
But we're interested, from what I'm hearing, we're interested in what protections we have
Absolutely.
in the county as far as money we put in. Okay, ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Money issue.
Oh,
No, we
no,
don't.
this is,
We're not
there's no
spending.
money right now. We're just proceeding to look into it.
Going back for more information.
Yes. Dave, symbolic. We had all opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Kankakee River Valley Enterprise Zone, expansion in the Grove area.
This is a request for an expansion in the enterprise zone in the village of Bradley for about 36 acres. It is for the purpose of developing a 50,000 square foot sports complex at the Hidden Cove facility, and also for the development of a age-restricted townhouse development in the area. Today we have Jeff Bennett and Greg Gates. Greg is the owner of the property, here to make a brief presentation on this request.
Up here. I'll talk briefly about the...
Hit it.
Hit it?
Okay.
There you go.
Like that.
Technology is
Budget's tough. The Kankakee River Valley Enterprise Zone boundaries are in the purple. The yellow box is the contiguous area that's being requested for expansion. We were at the Village of Bradley Monday night. They approved the ordinance and intergovernmental agreement. Went to Aroma Park last night. Mayor Grimsley said he'd approve it as long as we didn't talk, since it didn't affect them at all. We didn't talk and it got approved. So we voted to listen. The proposed expansion area, in fact, with the sportsplex, part of the property that Greg Yates bought is already in the enterprise zone, and the 50,000 square foot addition would in fact be in the enterprise zone. So it's truly right on the boundaries. Additionally, the L-shaped piece around it is a joint venture with Greg Yates and Blair Mitten for a 55 and older age-restricted senior project that'll be managed by Blair Mitten and Associates, which has really been, I heard Greg talking to the folks at Bradley Monday night. Blair lives in the community, and we really don't know what we have in Blair Mitten and Associates. They've become the premier developer of senior housing throughout the state of Illinois. They did the assisted living facility in Mantino at Illinois Diversitech. They did one in Watsika, Bloomington, Champaign, Peoria, Rockford, etc., and getting ready to go into Indiana. So it's that relationship that's been formed. Greg owned the land, and it's really the buffer between the residential and the existing Hidden Cove, which is being renovated, and the Sportsplex, which is being developed. It's quite a project. We think that the tourism potential to bring competitive youth sports to Kankakee County is really pretty special. It's a very difficult project to get started, and if it wasn't but for Greg's fortitude to stick with this and resources, because the financial markets sort of changed from the time that this got started. But I think soon you'll find that families that have been traveling out of town to go participate in that competitive youth sports will be here in town, and then there'll be a bevy of people coming into the community on weekends to participate. And there's a host of cooperation going on with not-for-profits that need space like this, that can use it during the daytime hours when there may not be that same kind of competitive youth sports.
Jeff, would you grab the mic and hold it close, because we're recording and it's not picking it up.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Just get it.
There we go. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Leo, if I could, I'm going to pass out. Finally, Mike suggested that we do an investment analysis for you to take a look at. And what we show here is, it's important to note, there is no property tax abatement on this project, okay? Your wisdom with the enterprise zone is such that only industrial projects receive property tax abatement in the Kankakee River Valley Enterprise Zone, and that was an evolution over time. There seems to be wisdom in that. So the benefit that would be derived from this project is sales tax exemption on building materials purchased within Kankakee County. There's lots of numbers here, but what we did is picked $2 million of building materials. The 6.25% sales tax would be exempted. Part of the benefit with your action would be that you wouldn't have to pay the state their portion of the sales tax. The Village of Bradley has approved foregoing their portion of the sales tax. The county's quarter would be about a $5,000 investment in this project, one-time shot, okay? And then the estimated property taxes, we took a property tax bill, you're about 11.6% at that location. So annually, you would receive an estimated amount of $4,625. So your $5,000 investment gets you $4,625 back a year. On the villas of Heritage Woods, we took an estimated sales price of $200,000, worked with a couple of assessors to come up with what we estimated the taxes to be of $4,000. $75,000 would be the approximate building materials. Your investment there would be $187 per unit, one-time shot, and your return on investment would be $462 a year. Any questions?
Mr. Witt?
Please try to answer them.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Jeff. Will they both go together?
Yes.
And the homes, the 55 and older, are free access to the sports complex?
All right.
Free? Is that part of their package? They get to go to the sports complex and use that free, or do they have to pay?
They get entrance to the sportsplex free. No charge to get indoors.
But they use the other equipment?
Look at Greg.
There won't be a fee for the,
You know what's been neat about this project? It's not, I think if those residents come up with some program, I think there's an open door to figuring out what's best for the residential and for the sportsplex itself.
I see things like this in the other schools when we travel.
Yeah.
And it's very nice.
That's a good suggestion that I think could be looked into.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any others? Mr. Scholl?
Yeah, thank you. I have a question. You said the county's cost would be 187, and you used the term per unit. What
What we did is, yeah, there's 84 units planned
Okay.
with a value of $200,000. So what we thought we'd do is break it per unit. So the sales tax exemption on building materials, if purchased within Kankakee County, you'd be foregoing the $187, our best estimate.
Per unit.
Per unit, and you'd be receiving, we can figure out a tax bill per unit annually then going forward, approximately $462.
All right, that's where my question is. You used the phrase per unit with respect to 187. I would assume that on the 462, it's per unit also.
Yes,
Okay,
thanks for pointing that out.
Mr. Rexberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like, an enterprise zone, what's the criteria to be in an enterprise zone?
Well, the criteria to expand the enterprise zone is that the project has to be committed within the next 2 years. That's the state's criteria. If the project or the development is going to commence, and that's the commitment that the developer has to provide to the local unit of government. So that's the criteria.
Is there a criteria that enterprise zones have to be in a slum and blighted area?
Not that I'm aware of.
No? Or impoverished areas? Sort of like a tip
There's
district?
No, Karen, there's 2 different types of expansions that we can apply for. There's option 1 and option 2. Option 1 is for slum and blighted areas, and it isn't when there's a project being proposed. What we do there is we canvass a specific area, and we come up with the income, the population, and the unemployment of an area, and we say we want an enterprise zone in that geographic area. That's option 1 in terms of expansion of the enterprise zone. So that would be in those kind of situations the criteria. Option 2 is for a proposed project, wherever it is, and that with the enterprise zone will help that project get over the hump and get it into the area.
Mike, if I may, and Karen, we were asked that question, and the reading from the enterprise zone, there's 2 sentences that I think respond directly to your question. I think it probably leads into, the intent. The proposed addition must provide an immediate substantial utility or benefit to the established zone and/or residents, okay? And then it discusses that it would be for stimulating neighborhood residential or commercial revitalization. So it's under that category that it fits.
Okay, and so an enterprise zone is established to revitalize an area otherwise not particularly favorable for...
That's not the only reason. I mean, that's not the only reason. It's to...
But isn't that why they were created?
I can't... In 1984, there was a number of reasons why, I can't go back, that far and tell you what the legislative intent was. I mean, in Dixon... Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, it's my understanding, excuse me, Jeff, it's my understanding that it is for areas that otherwise are difficult to redevelop and to stimulate development in those areas. And
You're not confusing it with the TIF, right?
well, I think they're both are tools for communities to use for that situation. I mean, I'm sorry, revitalization of this neighborhood's pretty vital. I mean, it's pretty, it doesn't need revitalization.
Yeah.
And it just makes me concerned of how much we're going to expand this enterprise zone in these TIF districts to where we're not getting any sales tax money. And I understand that this looks like an investment, but this development, I think, is going to happen anyway. So we get the sales tax and we get the property tax, which is sorely needed by this community. So I know this isn't a popular opinion, But I think we should start looking at how we expand these enterprise zones and TIF districts to help those communities like Pembroke and St. Anne and parts of Kankakee. They probably need revitalization. And be careful not to put it in places that we're going to have development anyway. So that's just my opinion.
If I may, just to comment on Village of Bradley's sentiment in that very regard, they were anxious to make an investment to see senior housing developed within their community, and they thought it fit their plan that went along with a very successful Uncle Leo Drive and the senior housing that went on there within the enterprise zone, and therefore hopes that the county would consider following their lead in making this investment to see development taking place. I think what must be noted, if you haven't been following it, there's not as many residential starts going on in Kankakee County, state of Illinois, and the country right now. And Bradley felt that this was a good step to see and encourage somebody to make what would ultimately be about a $16 million investment over time in Manhattan, just to get a flavor, because it's been fun to be in front of this group to get the trends that go on and the cycles of real estate. And we used to be standing up here wondering, what are we going to do with all these people moving into Kankakee County, right, with the school system? It's changed, folks. And in fact, in Manhattan, the first 200 people to buy a home in 2008 come to City Hall and they'll write you a check for $5,000. Okay, $5,000 check by Manhattan for the first 200 people that'll go there and buy a home, because there's not people buying homes. I think it's an interesting tool to hopefully encourage continued investment in the enterprise zone.
Mr. Witt?
Thank you, Chairman. Mike, Mr. Van Nel,
Yes.
if you vote for one of these, can you vote for one and not the other, or do you have to vote both of them together?
It's for the entire legal description, which would include both projects.
Well, that area, there are very few single homes out there around the sports complex. It's all duplexes right now. And I question whether we need more duplexes out there or not. I think the sports complex is a great idea, but going with more apartments and senior citizen homes, that area is saturated. I don't think there's a single home in that subdivision between Armour Road and Carmel Drive and Route 50.
There is. There are single-family homes.
Very few though. Okay, thank you.
Any others? McLaren?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really like the idea of this. I think that there's one of the big benefits, besides the tourism, is just an area for our area's youth to gather. I think we need more of this type of thing. I see this as very positive. I think it's a good trade-off. I appreciate the numbers that have been thrown in front of us. I'd certainly be in favor of this and vote definitely yes on this.
Okay, Mr. Tripp?
There's a lot of people
No, go ahead.
waiting in line out there on the senior housing, and I think it's well needed. I support this. If you're ready for a motion, I'll make the motion, we accept.
All right, you made the motion. Second by Mr. Scholl. Discussion, Mr. Washington.
Just one other statement, speaking as elder statesman.
Heavy on the elder.
There you go.
Is this 65 and older?
65 and older, and Jim just reminded me that I'm not the elder statesman. But there are seniors that just like Jim just said, people are lining up for these homes. We don't have enough senior housing within this Kankakee area proper, and I think it's a wonderful idea to bring more housing in for seniors and to bring in the sports complex. We are a growing community. We are not going to stop growing because of any particular reason. We may be growing at a slower rate sometimes and a higher rate at other times. But we are growing and we're going to continue to grow, and we have to grow with it or let it just run over the top of us.
Mr. James.
Thank you. I have a question for Mike. When does the purple markings come off the map? They seem to go up, but they never come off. Now, I would think that if parcel real estate was in the enterprise zone and then was completely developed, that at this time would come off, because if I'm correct, as long as it's in the enterprise zone, any projects you put in it, you are exempt from paying sales tax. Is that correct?
You're correct.
So when does the purple color come out?
Well, about 4 years ago, Stan, the board made a totally, they reevaluated this, asked every community to shave off the places that they didn't want to have on the map. So 4 years ago, they did. And at this time, we're kind of moving forward because we're in the midst of a 10-year enterprise zone cycle, which in, I think, 2014, this enterprise zone will expire. And at that time, we will evaluate, just like the census evaluates every 10 years, we evaluate our policies, we evaluate what we want to, do in these enterprise zones in terms of abatements and incentives, and then, we take a look and see where we want to put it. Now, each community's had an opportunity to do that, and that exercise has occurred, and that's where we're at right now.
Ms. Hertzberger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stan's got a good point, and it seems to me that enterprise zones are established by communities to direct development to those areas that they want development to happen. And it seems like we continue to wait for someone to say, hey, can I get an enterprise zone, and then we go give them one, which isn't exactly taking control of where the development is going to go. It's letting people develop where they want to and then giving them an enterprise zone just because they're going to develop there. And I think that's a bad policy. I mean, that's what government is there for. It's called government control. And we're there to control where we want certain issues. That's why we have zoning laws. And I just think that the more we expand this, we don't take any off. A lot of that development in there is already established and thriving and doing well, and I would want to put a development by the mall. I mean, why not? That's where all the people are going. So
Karen,
why give them a break?
we talked, we've had some conversations about that in the past with both enterprise zones, and you can see that the Manteno enterprise was very small. And, when we went through the process of, in 2005, do we expand it? And the idea is, no, we don't, in order to make that part of the negotiating with development. Hey, the community could say, listen, as part of their toolbox, economic development toolbox, don't expand it to the fullest extent. I mean, we could have 16 square miles of enterprise zone right now, but we said, you know what, we'll keep it in a very conservative amount, and with 5 communities, 11 square miles right now in the Kankakee River Valley Enterprise Zone is a little bit conservative. But if you give that out already, then what type of leverage does the community have when they're negotiating development with the developer? And that's kind of the approach we've taken in some of the, in Manteno, which I've been the administrator for 11 years. That's a conscious decision to say, hey, you just don't get it. We're not going to just, recklessly put it out there and hopefully have people go to those certain areas. Hopefully the crystal ball is that clear, but not sure. But again, it's a part of the negotiating process too. Yes, you do want to put it in certain locations, but others.
What are we negotiating? Greg wants to put his development there. He's got plans for it. Why are we negotiating? We're just giving a gift to someone who's already going to put a development there, and nothing against the development, nothing against Mr. Gates, and I was I had the same attitude in Manteno with Homestar Bank. I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense to me. The enterprise zones and the TIF districts are supposed to be used to encourage development in areas where otherwise you can't get the development to go there. And I think that's what we should use them for.
If
Mike, if I may. Karen, sometimes what you find, it's an attitude. And you'll find that an attitude of encouraging $20 million of investment into a town is a good thing. The other thing that we can go on forever and decide we're going to do it or not do it. I can tell you this, you'll find that developers do it much quicker when the attitude by government is to work with them, and hopefully there's a nominal investment for the return on that investment. I think Mike's, wisdom in trying to put together something that you can look at the investment you make and what you get in return.
If you don't mind, I'd like to say a little bit. Thanks for the opportunity to be here, Dave. Nothing hardly makes me more uncomfortable than feeling like I'm coming in here asking for something. I like to think that over the last 30 years or so of being in business, I'm very uncomfortable thinking that we can't go it alone. When I listened to your early proposal about the how do we loan people $15,000 to get in business, my instant reaction is should they be in business, but that's none of my concern. I think our experience in this community and county has been such that hopefully I don't think you've ever heard us ask for anything. I think we're trying to do the right things for the right reasons. The reason that I was willing to kind of go this process, and Jeff can tell you that, these wiser guys than me are trying to say, that's why these things are out here, is for developers to create momentum and in tandem with the communities, and that's why these programs were created. But the biggest reason in these two projects that I'd ask you to consider our proposal is truly, for instance, the sales tax related to the senior housing. That's pretty much a direct pass-through. Whatever the costs are to produce is going to go on to the end user. And who's going to save money is the people buying the units. Our goal, obviously, is to keep the cost as low as possible for these units. It's a skinny margin. It really is, because it's an expensive process. These are all brick type units. Now we put all these plans in place with the economy soaring, prices growing, etc. Now we're in a situation where every possible thing we can do to compact those prices, we have to do. The senior unit itself gets almost a $5,000 decrease in cost if we're able to do this. It doesn't change our margins. It doesn't change anything about what the general contractors and everybody else is going to make. We're able to actually take that right off the cost of the unit. To me, that's huge. Can we go ahead and do this? It will probably just have more difficulty selling the units, more difficulty in the pace that we're able to bring them online, which means a slower process in how quickly those revenues would be recovered by taxation or property taxes. And of course, our goal is to get that done more quickly for our own reasons, because interest costs and land costs and development costs are very expensive, but then also to have those units full of people who have now located for their own benefit to a development, and they're paying property taxes and so on. So, that's would be the reason from my perspective that it would be beneficial for everyone for the sales tax portion of the villas. Yes, you're correct. We will do that project. It probably will just impact greatly how much people are paying for the unit and or the speed or the tempo at which we're able to sell it. And my basic sentiment is also that these programs ought to be for a good reason. It can't just be because somebody's connected. I certainly don't feel like I'm politically connected, and know very few of you all, and that's probably to my detriment. The sports complex is an incredibly risky venture. I don't want to say that everywhere, but the truth is there's a tremendous amount of risk in a project like that. One of the things that I've tried to do, it's true in a campground development we're attempting to complete, it's true in a lot of the areas, is to do the things that other people maybe would not want to take that much risk. And quite honestly, that's been one of the challenges of making this project go forward. It's a tremendous amount of personal risk to me and my family because of the direction that we've chosen to go on this. We've sort of put this in the back burner a little bit, not that we're advertising that publicly, but we've sort of held back on some of the timing on this because when we originally started, due to whatever reasons, we were under the impression we were in the enterprise zone, and that became a part of our calculation. And then now we're looking at a pretty significant increase in cost that's really just it increases our level of risk. Do we believe in the project? Do we believe that it can absolutely not only benefit local people and bring traffic to the area? Absolutely. I'm so committed to that we're it's not even probably a question of whether or not we're going to take that risk. We may have to do some other calculation and squeezing, and we may have to solicit, other means of compacting those hard costs. But the truth of the matter is, I like to think that everybody here and everybody in all the communities was so wanting to participate in that in a way that doesn't really cost them anything, and maybe some foregoings, that they would be, patting us on the back in some ways and maybe smacking us on the behind and saying, get out there and do it. And these are some of the limited ways that we've chosen to ask for that. But the process of the funding, the process of seeking all that, we're not asking for a lot, I don't believe. And I think that we are taking a tremendous amount of personal investment into the county and the city. So while I 100% agree with your posture on that, I really do. I think that programs should be reserved for the opportunities that are really needed and that really do help the masses and not the few. I honestly believe that this does help the masses and not the few. That's all I get to say, and I'll shut up now.
We have a motion on the floor. I have not forgotten that. We'll let Ms. Hertzberger speak one more time, and then we'll call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Mr. Yates' comments, but I have to say this. Mr. Bennett got up and talked about how houses aren't selling, and that we're overdeveloped right now. We have more new construction on the market. And I had made the comment one time at a meeting that, do we get involved in that as a government? You remember that, Mike? And I asked, should we have policies to keep from overbuilding and when the market gets slow? And Commissioner Washington made a comment that we should let the market do what the market will do. And to me, in this situation, we are not letting the market do what the market should do. We are helping somebody build more housing in a market that's already slow. So I just want to make that point, that, you can't have it one way and then not, you just got to stick with your policies.
We will be going,
One comment I have.
out of respect of my elders, I will Mr. Washington speak.
One word that Karen inserted in her statement was control. We do not control. All we can do is hope to manage what we can manage as a government. And part of that management is seeing to it that there's an even or level table for each organization to operate within. This particular situation with the enterprise zone is no different than any other situation that is contiguous with the enterprise zone and they wish to be part of it, participate in the enterprise zone benefits. I don't think it's our business as a government to control anything but our own operations within the government itself.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend this on to the county board.
Roll call.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Hertzberger?
Nay.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. James? Ms. McBride? Mr. Marcon? Mr. Scholl?
Aye.
Mr. Tripp?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Witten?
Nay.
Mr. McLaren?
Aye.
Mr. Oltop?
Aye. Mr. Van Mel has to leave. His father-in-law passed away at the funeral today. We extend our sympathy to him and wish him and his family well. Motion carried. Going on to transportation. Canadian National Railroad purchase of the EJ&E Elgin Joliet and what is the?
Elgin Joliet Eastern.
Okay, Elgin Joliet Eastern
You don't have the visual
Railroad.
clue that you do.
Pardon?
You don't have the visual clue that they do.
I didn't have it either. I actually did.
I would like to point out it's a small world. 3 years ago, Mr. Yates' father and my father were hospital roommates in Terre Haute, Indiana after some heart surgery, so it's a very strange world to have those things happen.
The presentation you're going to see today was made by Mr. Dusing to the Transportation Land Use Subcommittee of the Regional Planning Commission at their last meeting. And Rich Howell is chairman of that subcommittee, and George Washington is a member of that subcommittee, and that subcommittee requested that Kyle make the presentation to you today. There's also a resolution in your packet that's, in essence, what the subcommittee, we never did quite get the language right, so you can look at it and debate the language all you want. I hate resolutions, I'm terrible at it. That's my confession for today. Mr. Dusing is the long-range planner for the Will County Land Use Department, and I owe him more favors than I can possibly repay, so be nice to him today. He'll make a presentation on this. Please ask any questions you've got. Colin, it's all yours.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, the Canadian National would like to purchase the EJ&E, which is what they call a circumferential. It's the rail line that goes from Waukegan to Elgin to Aurora to Joliet and out to Gary, Indiana. And EJ&E wants to purchase pretty much the entire line of close to 200. I keep hearing different numbers, but about 200 miles of rail, and then for about $300 million, and then add in another $100 million of infrastructure improvements to the entire facility, and then run additional trains. The issues that Will County has is pretty much the location of where the EJ&E currently runs through Will County, and for you folks also south of Cook, for the traffic that is generated from Kankakee County to Chicago central area. But then also the impacts that it could have on passenger rail service, plus also the additional rail traffic that the infrastructure improvements will generate, which then tails down to what the surface road traffic impacts will be based on the rail traffic impacts, along with the hazardous materials that the rail will be carrying. Once again, let's see, where's the pointer? Thank you. So Waukegan's here. What the EJ&E, what CN wants to do is purchase the blue area, and the blue line represents where rail traffic will increase. Red lines are currently owned by CN, and that is where the rail traffic will decrease from CN managed lines. So the rail traffic that currently goes through this segment here to the distribution yards, they won't have to worry about that anymore. What they want to do is purchase all of this, and then also purchase a rail yard in Lake County, Indiana, called the Kirk Yards, and redevelop them for CN-specific use. The CN does not own the rail yards here. They have to wait for somebody else to give them the okay to use the rail yards to distribute the cars accordingly. However, so what they want to do is basically bypass all of Chicago, do the distribution, and then ship them back south and out east. To south would be through Kankakee County on the way to Memphis. Let's see. So Will County is basically right here, just south of what they call Frontenac, Frontenac is Ogden Avenue in DuPage County, and it goes through Will County, through downtown Plainfield, through the east side of Joliet, and then southward, south of New Lenox, Frankfort, Okina, and into Cook County, Madison, Richton, and Chicago Heights, and then into northwest Indiana, Dyer, and Griffith. Griffith is also highly impacted because it also goes straight through the downtown. Passenger rail service, one of the big questions was, will it affect the Amtrak? a proposal that's been going on for a long time has been cutting off what they call the St. Charles Air Line, which runs through the downtown Chicago area. It's about a 7-mile rail segment, and it connects up Union Station to CN's line that runs through here in Kankakee County. Well, that proposal is not on the table for this acquisition. CN will no longer use it, but they're not going to abandon it. They're willing to set aside X number of dollars for Amtrak with annual percentage increments. Give that money to Amtrak so Amtrak can manage that rail segment for their own uses. And that will be under the agreement basically indefinitely. The next, so there will be no Amtrak disruption of service. However, there would be possibly disruption to what they call the Star Line. We'll go back to the wrong button. Sorry. The Star Line under